Welcome to Aerospace from the Ground Up, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes and into the hearts of the humans who bring aerospace to life. I'm your host, Nikki Malcolm, and in each episode, we will uncover the diverse and inspiring roles that make this industry soar. From technicians and supply chain experts to designers and machinists, we highlight the incredible variety of pathways that shape the world of aerospace. Join us as we dive into the journeys, challenges, and triumphs of the extraordinary individuals behind the planes. This is Aerospace from the Ground Up. Welcome back to Aerospace from the Ground Up. I'm your host, Nikki Malcolm, and today we have a remarkable guest whose career spans over 2 decades in the electronics and aerospace industry. Joining us is Jay Schmidt, Vice President and General Manager at Impact Electronics, where he has dedicated 16 years to driving innovation and excellence. Jay's extensive experience also includes serving as Vice President of Operations at Meggitt Owaco for 4 years. In addition to his impressive industry roles, Jay is passionate about education, sharing his knowledge as an adjunct faculty member at WSU Vancouver and a former lead instructor at Clackamas County College. Jay, welcome to the show. Let's dive into your journey and your exciting work that you're doing at Impact.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So tell me about your career journey. And the goal of this is really to show people what the past looked like. So let's go all the way back to the beginning.
All the way back. Wow, that's a long time ago. It's kind of like a Grateful Dead song. What a long, strange trip it's been. So, my manufacturing career started, believe it or not, about 1979, 1980, roughly. And I was going to college, first or second year of college, and I needed to make some money, so I started soldering circuit boards. And it's interesting, soldering circuit boards by hand. So I do know which end of the soldering iron is hot. Fast forward to now, and I'm the general manager of an electronics manufacturing company. So you think about, where did those seeds get planted? And it was actually on the production floor with the soldering iron in hand. And so I started there, and then my first leadership position was when I was 24 years old, and I was I was the supervisor of a department that built light dimmers, the company that you mentioned, Oeco, and we built light dimmers for 85% of the aircraft flying in the Western world. And so most likely you've all been on an aircraft that had an Oeco light dimmer, and it's just like the cockpit lighting dimmer, and so I did that for a few years, and then went on and continued my education, and was a plant manager, and then I went back to Oeco after some time, again doing aerospace and defense. And then somewhere along the way, I got a relationship with the fine man named Frank Nichols, who was the CEO of Silicon Forest Electronics. And he brought me over, and I've been at Silicon Forest, which got acquired by Impact Electronic Solutions a couple of years ago. And so over 16 and a half years. So I've been in electronics and in aerospace and defense manufacturing. It's just an absolutely fun industry to be in. When you can drive by an airport and you look and you see an F-16 taking off, and I know that the light dimmers are on F-16, or the power supplies came from the company that I or the production line that I managed, is just way cool.
I love that. I was visiting a member yesterday, and they make the door handles for the 737s, and it's just so cool to be and see part of the airplane that you'll actually see when you get on it. It's really exciting. Did being in aerospace electronics impact your decision at all in your career? Were you like, yes, all about aerospace, or did you lean more towards electronics?
To me, the reason why I started in that company, I started at what used to be Tektronix, and it was just because electronics manufacturing was on the rise, and it sounded cool, and something that I knew how to solder. But the aerospace part of it for me was, the cool factor. Again, knowing that what I did, and that the idea of being mission critical, that every component's got to work and every part has to be soldered right, and all those various systems on an airplane have to work together, and they're all everything's mission critical, and so
Mm.
I just like the kind of the intensity in and around that. So.
Yeah, I love that too. What do you think the skills that you possess are that make you good at your job?
Well, in the leadership role that I have, I think that I'm a big fan of the late great Dr. Stephen Covey, and I years ago, when I was a young supervisor, I actually got to see him speak, and all of that stuff has carried with me. And I think as a leader in the organization, the concept seek first to understand,
Yeah.
learning to listen, listen empathically, not listening just to respond. So I
Hmm.
think that's a huge element of it. Obviously, it gets you to a much better place with the interactions that you have with not just your employees, but your suppliers and your customers and your bosses. But the idea of seeking first to understand has always been a big thing for me.
Mm.
And then humility is a big thing. And yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we definitely
yeah,
need a lot of that.
yeah, yeah. And
What?
yeah, and the only other thing I was going to mention, as you know, is having a sense of humor. And there's an old saying, humor is the best form of being serious.
Hmm.
And obviously you can't be goofy all the time, but I think that having a sense of humor is a fantastic tool. So.
Yeah, I agree, and a good way to stay sane most days. What would you say? Young Jay, what were those qualities coming in when you were, you say you knew the right end of a soldering iron. So, what were the qualities that you could look back at that younger version of yourself and say, those were the things that made me good at the original step into the
Yeah,
industry?
I think I was open to experiences.
Mm,
Um, I worked in a very multicultural environment in the electronics manufacturing
hmm.
industry. I think because of my experiences, I learned dirty words in 9 different languages.
Well, you
But
can teach them to me offline.
yeah, yeah. But I think, and I got moved. A lot of people would say, "Well, shoot, you're in that one department for 3 months, and then they moved you somewhere else." And some people could get frustrated with that and say, "I don't understand why they keep moving me around." But the other person would say, "Wow, what a great opportunity! I'm getting more experiences." And so I look at those times when I was in production departments and making less than $3 an hour as my internship. And I mean, I got
Wow.
to, again, I got to get my hands dirty in a lot of different ways. So I think those foundational experiences like that and getting a lot of diversity in experience was really helpful.
I love that. And what does a day in Jay's life look like? I think people always
Um,
want to know that. Like, what does your role actually look like in
yeah.
practice?
Well, I'll tell you, when I get to Silicon Forest Electronics, the very first thing I do is I put on my shop coat and my static strap, and I get out and I go to Gemba. I walk the manufacturing floor. That's the
Great.
very first thing I do every day. You've probably heard the phrase "go to Gemba," a lean tool that
Mhm.
get out and as a leader in manufacturing, get out and where the action's really happening. And I get out and talk to my team members and teammates and listen. And so that's the first thing I do every day is I get out and go to Gemba, if you will. And then typically there's some kind of executive reporting that has to happen. It's in the role that I'm in, I obviously have what you would call TPS reports. Um, you know, just saying, right? But yeah,
That's
there's the
funny.
blocking and tackling that we've got to do in terms of some reporting and things. And so, depending on the day or the week or the month, there's always some kind of reporting.
Yeah.
But and I like to do. We've had this thing for years. We called it 360 degrees of impact. Not meaning the company, but
Yeah.
again, a Stephen Covey thing where the law of the harvest, where we spend time with suppliers, customers, employees, and our community partners as well,
Mm.
much like the PNAA. And moving through that cycle, I like to, we like to have customer business reviews, supplier business reviews, treating everybody adult to adult, and
Yeah.
so trying to be interactive throughout the day. And then yeah, it's not unusual that I'll probably and then a lot of times when you're on business travel, going to trade shows, Heli Expo, maybe Paris Air Show, things like that.
That is always one of the coolest things about the job in aerospace or jobs in aerospace when you get to certain roles. You get to go see some pretty cool stuff, especially at the shows like the Heli Expo and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to your younger self starting in aerospace?
Um, probably just that concept of go get a lot of different experiences and
Hmm.
don't have tunnel vision. Um,
Yeah.
be open and be open to a lot of different opportunities because things might come at you that you're a great fit for, but you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Um, and then don't be afraid to listen to those that are have been doing it for a while. Um, as a young man at one time, back when I was in my early 20s as a young supervisor, I was really fortunate to have some very experienced mentors, and that's part of the reason why they encouraged me to keep going to college and finish my degrees and such
Hmm.
along the way. And so and I think that's probably another thing too is not just having a single path. A lot of people think, well, you go to college, then you get a job. Well, I got a job, and then I went to school the whole time while I was working. And for
Hmm.
me, I thought that was hugely beneficial versus just going to sitting in the classroom. So I would say, um, use your work environment as your living lab. Uh,
Mm.
yeah.
It's a good one. I did the companies that you worked for pay for your education?
Yes, and that's
Yes.
another benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always trying to encourage students to say, you might consider going to work first and then going to school because then you won't get saddled with a bunch of debt at the end of things. Because most of the companies that I've worked for have at least some level of tuition
Yeah.
reimbursement for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally took advantage of that, but I would have paid for it myself, obviously, if because I was,
Yeah.
I just thought that would make sense. So,
And I really resonate with the what you said about listening to the people that have been doing it longer. I am very guilty of the fact that I, of course, thought I knew everything when I was younger and did not heed the advice of many people that nowadays I just go, they were
uh-huh.
right. They were all right. So
Yeah.
sorry to all those people that I didn't listen to and should have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You brought up a great point that I think if I was going to give advice to the young Jay, it would be maybe ask one more question.
Oh,
When somebody's giving you advice, ask them the why behind it. That
yeah.
that might be something that I would do.
Oh,
Just can you tell me a little bit about why you brought that up, or I see what you're doing here versus just following along, but maybe ask the one more why behind it. So
that's a really solid piece of advice for sure because it helps you really understand the process instead of just the doing of it. It's the part behind it, which I think expands your knowledge base substantially. I love that.
yeah.
What are the most rewarding aspects of working in aerospace for you?
Oh wow. Yeah, we talked about the opportunity that I did get to go to the Paris Air Show and
Yeah.
um, I worked. I literally got to travel around the world and go to places like India and Singapore and Japan. A lot of aerospace going on in Japan. So,
Just a little.
yeah, there's that part of it to be able to to see the world essentially. But I think also understanding that this is the aerospace industry. When you look at like the history of the world, it hasn't been. I mean, this is like what the last 200 years, maybe not
Yeah.
if that, or
And I mean
150
that's like
years.
100 and some change. Yeah, really.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
commercial aerospace certainly.
Yeah. So and also for me, I'm old enough that I've been able to see the transition of things. The unmanned systems or uncrewed systems
Yeah.
world now is, nobody would have thought about that 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
The idea that you're gonna have a drone take off near the Columbia River, and it's gonna go somewhere on the other side of the ocean and do some exploration or things like that. So it's that part of me is just fascinated by it.
I agree. I think, you look at the Jetsons that I watched when I was young and see honestly how close to that we really are or that we're getting anyway. And
Yeah,
it's just it felt like that future was so distant and so far away, and it just has come in
yeah.
our lifetime, which has been phenomenal and exciting to watch and be a part of. And especially I know that with Impact and with Silicon Forest, you are really diversified as far as your customer base goes, so you get to work with quite a few different types of industries beyond just the traditional commercial aerospace. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you talked about like I said, it was formerly called unmanned, now uncrewed systems, but we do
Hmm.
work for air, ground, and underwater uncrewed systems,
Yeah.
and sea exploration, and think about the things that are helping the warfighter with ground systems, where back in the
Hmm.
day, they would say, go get into the foxhole, and when somebody yells, you jump out of the foxhole and go running through the enemy line. Now you could take a tractor off your back and throw it out there with a camera on it, and it does that work for you so that a human's life is not at jeopardy.
Wow.
So seeing those kind of things, we have some circuit card assemblies that we built in our facility that are on the International Space Station by way of one of our customers in the Seattle area.
That's
And
cool.
so, you think about something built in Vancouver, USA, that's flying around the world on a 24-hour basis. I mean, I get excited about that.
Me too. So I think we might be in the right industry.
Yeah.
So, how can students best prepare themselves for a career in aerospace?
Um, for me, I was thinking about that. It's like, if you don't have opportunities where you've got, I mean, I love going into classrooms and doing show and tells and talking about the aerospace and uncrewed and showing different things. And I've got some great, in this part of Southwest Washington, some great education connections where I do that. But I would say, if a student doesn't have that, maybe get out to the job fairs
Mm.
and go. You don't necessarily have to be applying and accepting a job to go to the job fair, but at least you get to talk to people and understand their perspective. And I was thinking, that's a if you could go search job fairs and then maybe isolate in and around technology or aerospace or something advanced like that,
Yeah.
and at least you start building your Rolodex of connections, and at the same time you start learning from people that have been in it for a while. So that's one thing. And then also finding the like I said, if you do have opportunities to do internships, my company is always interested in doing internships where somebody will come in during their summer break in high school and they'll work for us for 2 or 3 months, and yeah, it may be soldering circuit boards or it may be putting parts through inspection processes and things like that. But boy, that to me as an employer later on, if I knew that you work in that kind of an industry, it just adds more to your resume. So
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be really fun, right? Especially since you get to work on some of those cool things that other people, and most time we can't talk about it, but we get to work on some pretty cool projects that at minimum you know that you were a part of, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
know that in addition to your work, you're really involved in education. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, years ago, oh, probably, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago at a prior company, I had uh, quite a few, I had a growing organization and I had a real need to develop my frontline leaders, my next generation of frontline leaders. So I talked to my good friends at Clackamas Community College down in Clackamas, and I said, can we put together some kind of a emerging leadership program that we could have our employees that we believe are going to be our next generation of leaders go through. And so we talked about putting together a model of different kind of communications and interaction essentials. And then the person at Clackamas Community College says, well, we're going to need an instructor to do this. It would probably be good to have somebody that's got industry experience or industry, connections. And she says, "Do you know anybody?" And I say, "Well, how about me?" So I
Love it.
started doing we called it the Manufacturing Leadership Academy back then, and I did that for quite a while in addition to my day job, and it was a Saturday morning kind of a thing, and I absolutely loved it. And I had a guy go through that program who had a PhD in chemistry.
Hmm.
And so you think about it. So here's somebody their whole life has been in technology. He's got a PhD in chemistry. He was developing new ink formulations for a jet printer company.
Mm.
But all of a sudden, he got put into a role where he had to lead other people. Way, way different skill set. So he really, I think he really benefited from the coursework that we had because he like I said I don't know, it's a different left brain or right brain or something like that. So I did that for a long time, and then when I moved on to the Washington State side of the river, I got connected with the folks at WSU Vancouver, and now I currently do what's called Leadership Essentials, which again is for somebody who's a brand new emerging leader or somebody, let's say, has been an engineer for several years and now has to lead other engineers, and they just haven't had that tool set, shared with them. So I'm doing that, and then I'm also in pretty good contact with our good friends down the street here at Clark College. So yeah, in addition to my Silicon Forest job, I absolutely love the education side of it, from the developing the next generation of leaders.
It's such an important thing, right? Because oftentimes what ends up happening is the rock stars that are individual contributors go get promoted because they're rock stars and they just don't have it's a completely different skill set, right? Going from major single contributor to leader is I mean, I failed the first time that I tried it, and it definitely takes a shift, just in the way you think and the way you act and what you think is important. So I love that.
Right.
I am really curious about one of the questions that I want to ask all of our guests is what did you want to be when you were little? And how does that compare with what you do now?
Well, I think you might know the answers, but I was always a music guy. My and it's because my dad was a singer. My dad would sing without a microphone. He'd sing in front of the Elks Club Orchestra at these big events in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And I wasn't around that year, but I was always in music because of that. So yeah, in my high school days, I was a headbanger and always I played in the band, played the trombone, but I always wanted to be the rock and roll guy. And um, I never quite got into it but when I was 40 years old, when I turned 40, I went and bought my first guitar and learned how to play.
Wait, so you just started playing when you were 40?
Well, that was a few years ago, but yeah.
Well, so I mean like 3 or 4 at least, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so now of course me and my son, we have a classic rock band that plays occasionally, but that was my thing, all those 70s and early 80s classic rock bands.
Yeah, I'm very interested in I suspect that this will not be the only time that I hear that someone in aerospace wanted to be a musician because as
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of us that are into music in the industry, so I love that.
Yeah. If I could
Great.
add, I think that there's a good connection too between, and a lot of people probably don't think this way, but music and manufacturing are very similar because of beat and pulse rate and rhythm and pace of manufacturing. So when you think about just-in-time manufacturing and music and beat and pulse, it really clicks together.
I love that. I've never heard that comparison, but I can absolutely see there's so many different things that need to work together in concert to make things
Yeah.
happen, and I love that. manufacturing is an art in and of itself, and the comparison to music, is near and dear to me. So,
Mhm.
anything else that you want to share with the audience before we close out today?
Um, Probably again just the idea that there's a lot of cool things going on here in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, we've had big aerospace in the Puget Sound region. The Columbia River Gorge is one of the largest uncrewed systems industry clusters in the whole world, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of aviation and aerospace connectivity there. I'm on board with the City of Vancouver Economic Development, and the idea that we're going to be a gateway to other opportunities in the Portland area as well. So just that this region is ripe for this kind of work, and the infrastructure. Obviously, if I have a WSU connection, but the industry connections and the education connections and our community partners, much like your organization, I think that triangle of things makes it really really cool.
I love that. Very good. Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate you coming on today. It's great
Great,
talking with you.
thank you.
Thanks.